Weirding Way Media.
Welcome to episode 151 of the Filmumentaries podcast. This is me, as usual, Jamie Benning, here sitting in my little office at home with just my laptop and my microphone. And in this episode, I chat with model maker, VFX supervisor and filmmaker Ian Hunter, a legend in the industry, about his career that spans some of the most technically ambitious and visually inventive films ever made, from the flooded reactor tanks of James Cameron's The Abyss to the surface of Mars in Total Recall. Ian grew up in Monrovia, California, and his parents would give him and his brothers model kits just to get them out of their hair, and inadvertently launched at least one of those kids into a 40-year career in Hollywood. We hear about stealing his dad's German black velvet to make a Starfield in the garden shed after seeing Star Wars, making Super 8 movies in high school, and the genuinely jaw-dropping story of walking into a Wells Fargo bank to fake rob it for a school film, and coming face to face with a relation of another Hollywood legend. Ian talks about drifting away from an aerospace path at Cal Poly Pomona and stumbling into the movie business via a classified ad, swapping one job involving plastics, chemicals and toxic fumes for another, landing on The Abyss, working under the mentorship of the legendary model supervisor Mark Stetson at Boss Films, and the long road that would eventually take him to some of cinema's most celebrated practical effects sequences. It's been a long time coming, this interview. I've been wanting to talk to Ian for some time now, and I'm really glad that we did it. He's such a cool guy to speak to. He's got a great attitude. He's very articulate. I think you're going to enjoy this one. So sit back, make a cup of tea, and here's my interview with Ian Hunter, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on. Ian, thanks so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you here. I always like to ask people where it all began. I mean, were you building stuff as a kid? And do you remember the first time that you built something and it really kind of clicked for you?
I was very fortunate looking back that I had parents who were artists. My father especially was an artist who was a trained interior decorator. He was a musician. He painted in oils and acrylics. He did pastel portraits, and I had two older brothers, and so he always encouraged us to do art and gave us things to do project-wise. And I think at some point, which was very formative later on in my career, was we were doing art. I had these brothers who I always wanted to stick with them to do these hobbies. And at some point, my father gave us all model kits to build, and I think that was mainly to get us out of his hair. So I took to the model building right away at a very young age, and then encouraged to do drawing and building art, stuff on our own. We were always, told, to go out and play and make things, and we'd steal my dad's paint stir sticks and make Roman swords and stuff like that, and then eventually he used to paint black velvet paintings, these beautiful black velvet paintings, not conquistadors fighting bulls, but usually like the head of Christ. That was his favorite thing, was Max von Sydow dying in agony. And and so he had this expensive black velvet, and my older brothers and I watched Star Wars, and one of them said, I'm going to do my own space opera. So we built some spaceship models, and then we got my dad's really expensive German black velvet, hung it in the garden shed, and punched holes in it and backlit it to be a starfield. So it was a beautiful starfield, but it was useless to do any more painting on. But my father and my mother sort of saw that we had potential in terms of being creative kids and sort of forgave us for ruining everything that they gave us. But yeah, that was the best thing, was to have a set of parents who were understanding and encouraging, and
Yeah.
kind of drove us along.
Yeah, I often sort of talk about how I think we kids are all instinctively kind of creative and sometimes destructive, but then you learn about creating as well through that, I think. But sometimes that's kind of sort of bashed out of us in school, particularly in secondary school, where people start to hone in what your skills are and what you need to do to achieve a career. And often the arts aren't kind of a popular choice in schools. It certainly wasn't the choice in my school particularly. Did you find that as you grew older, as you went to high school, that you were able to kind of continue these hobbies and sort of start to form them in your head in a way that could be an actual career in the future?
Well, funny enough, I also had a great interest in aerospace, aviation. So
Mm.
I always thought, I took this sort of more advanced classes when I was going through would be elementary school here. Um, I took some tests, and they're like, "Oh, these are IQ tests, aren't they?" And like, "Yes, they are." So I was sort of pushed into the more advanced classes, and I thought I was going to go into aerospace more. But
Mm.
near the end of that, so it sort of makes sense, because visual effects, you're doing a lot of sort of on the fly engineering and things, but aerospace would have been much more formative, or restrictive. But one thing that did happen, which I thought was very funny, is for extra credit in some of these classes, we would make Super 8 movies. That's how far back I'm going, on Super 8 film. And so the teachers at our school also encouraged us to be creative, to, like, throw these things in there. So it was great growing up. I grew up in Monrovia, California, and it was great because not only were my parents supportive, but once we got to school, they were supportive also, to let us do these things. And one interesting moment was this also affected my later desire to get into the movie business. Was we were making a movie trying to explain the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, which is unlawful search and seizure. And so we were high school kids, pimply faced high school kids, and we went to the local Wells Fargo bank in Monrovia, and we were going to rob the bank. That was part of the Super 8 movie. And so we show up there, and I said, guys, we should probably tell them that we're just high school students and we're faking robbing the bank, not
Yes.
actually robbing the bank. They said, "Do you think that'd be a problem?" I said, "Yeah, it could be a problem. They might not take kindly to us attempting to rob the bank, even though we're simulating it." So we go into the Wells Fargo, and we go up to the teller, and of course, they push me up because I'm the oldest looking one. And I say to her, "Hi, we're from the high school. We're making a little movie, Super 8 movie, and we're simulating a bank robbery. And so we just want to know if we have permission to rob your bank." And she gets all very weirded out and nervous, and shakingly grabs the phone and calls somebody. And then she says, "The vice president of the bank's going to come over and talk to you." I'm like, okay. So we all walk over to her in a big cluster of nervous looking kids looking down at the ground. And this woman comes up who is super excited. She's an older woman with glasses and her hair up, and she's super excited. She's like, "You're from the high school? Yeah. You guys are making a movie?" Like, "Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. What do you want to do?" "Well, we want to fake like we're robbing the bank." "Oh, that sounds really fun." Like, she's enthusiastic about the whole thing. And I said, "Yeah, do you mind?" She says, "Oh no, I love when kids make movies. My son makes movies." And I said, "Really? Who's your son?" And she said, "Oh, my son's Rick Baker. He does makeup effects and
No
creatures."
way.
And I was so on the
Come
floor, like,
on.
because he was a hero of mine, still a hero of mine.
Yeah, of course.
So amazing, going from mom to the teachers. Now even the bank vice president of Wells Fargo encourages us to make movies. So that was a great moment. We got extra credit and everything.
That
Um,
is crazy. I mean, what are the odds of your world crashing into
yeah,
Rick Baker? I mean, that's just bizarre, isn't it? But how wonderful that it all started to link up for you at this point. It sounds like you've been through the kind of Star Wars phase. You're now into making your movies and making it on Super 8.
Right.
it's such a great way because you've got the camera in your hand, you're responsible for the film, you've got to get it developed so there's time to sort of percolate as well while you're waiting for it to be developed. Then when you get it back, you've got to edit it yourself if you want to do that. Or were you just doing it all in camera?
We were trying to do in camera, but also when it came back, of course, for the lasers, um, we had to get in
Yeah.
there with magnifying glass and a pin, and scratch the scratch the image. And then we were doing things like, we knew that if you overamped electric resistors, like if you had like a, you know, say a 12-volt resistor, and you amped
Mm.
it with house current, it would explode. So we would often do our explosions by literally shooting resistors exploding and giving us explosions on black that we could comp in. It was thinking
That's
back, it
crazy.
was
That's
like
great.
we were really
Yeah.
trying anything we could just to make these things better.
Yeah, I mean that approach of being well, that sort of linear, destructive approach, and that nature of film having to scratch it on the film. Oh, that scratch wasn't a great scratch. Well, we're stuck with it now, and
Right.
and I mean it's kind of a great discipline and a great way to start. But I imagine, I'm sure we'll talk about it later when we get there. But I imagine, in many ways, you do things in reverse in the real world. You sort of design the shot first and then reverse engineer it. Whereas when you're starting out, of course, you're just using whatever you've got and you're sort of making it up on the fly. But did that connection to Rick go any further?
Um, Not until years and years later. I mean, we would
Mm,
work on movies that he worked on, but never together. Because
yeah.
my specialty was miniatures, and it went off that direction. And his
Mm,
was, of
mm,
course, creature effects. So
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
while we worked on the same films, but not directly. Um, the only, in fact, the time when it finally happened was, Rick sort of retired, and he closed down his studio, and I still had a
Mm,
studio in Sylmar, California at the time. So we needed a forklift. So we went over and bought his forklift. So for a while I was using his forklift. That's, hopefully some magic was coming off of that.
did you ever have the
But
opportunity to say you met his mum once
oh, absolutely.
whilst robbing a
Yeah,
bank?
I
Yeah.
did. I took the opportunity to tell him the whole story.
Yeah.
And there's
Very
something
cool.
else. I hate to go going off on a tangent about Rick, but years ago, this also sort of got me into the business, was, or drove me to be in the business, was there was a moving museum exhibit of special effects that was at our local Los Angeles Museum of Science and Industry, and it traveled around the country. And they had
Mm,
different displayed models. They had some stuff from Masters of the Universe, and they had the makeups from Masters of the Universe. And the other thing that really impressed me was a matte painting from the birds that Albert Whitlock had done, and it was
oh, nice.
very small. My dad had been a painter, so to look at that and sort of see what the approach he took, he actually painted it in different focuses. So where the live action was going to be composited in, that was in
Yeah.
focus. But as you got further back, it got softer and more out of
An old
focus,
trick that. Yeah. Yeah.
and just amazing stuff. And so I'm looking at the makeups for Masters Universe, and they were nice. And I'm not gonna knock them, but they looked like makeups you would find in a movie.
Yeah.
and and then sort of off in the corner in the dark, like not really part of the central display, was a case. And I'm like, what
Mm.
is in there? So I walked over to the case, and the back was to us as we walked up. And I came around the corner, and in the case was Rick Baker's head from American Werewolf in London.
Oh, wow.
And this didn't look like a makeup. This looked like a taxidermied animal. I mean, the quality,
Mm.
the difference between what had gone into making this rubber monster with yak hair or whatever look real and look believable and look, even static, look frightening.
Mm.
Just there's just the world of difference in terms of of the input of the artist to to create this piece. I mean, he could, use the same techniques, use the same, methods. A lot of times he used the same people, but the quality, the sort of personal input that he exhibited in that really really impressed me. And it was the kind of thing that, my father, growing up again with my brothers, we were all artists. He always said that you should be your own worst critic. Like, other people will tell you how bad you are, but if you're harder on yourself, if you strive to like do better the next time than you did the last time, um, no one can get to you, because you're always going to be, judging your own work and trying to do better. And so I was just so impressed by his work, and always wanted to sort of like know that if I'm going to make the effort, I might as well try to put the best effort out, and have something that's going to, sort of last, if you will.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. No, that is an amazing sequence in that movie. I mean, it sort of still scares me to this day, I think. I've talked about it before on this podcast, but I watched it in circumstances where I shouldn't have been watching it as a kid. Me and my sister had recorded it off the TV. My dad was out washing the car, so there was like this double scariness, double jeopardy going on. But what was the kind of shift from, okay, so this could be a career then, and how did you go and finally enter the industry?
Well, so I remember back, I wanted to be an aerospace guy. So I,
Yeah.
actually, attended, Cal Poly Pomona, uh, which is a technical school
Mm.
in California, and was taking aerospace. And long and short of it was, I ended up dropping out of school. I had some financial difficulties. I had difficulty getting my core classes, and so it was just, um, not really working out. I attended for about a year and a half, but it wasn't working out. And this is the funniest thing, because I never thought I'd actually be able to get into the business. But I was working at a place, um, where I was making out of plastic, um, acid baths. If you imagine, you're doing, photochemical etching on circuit boards, okay, and that
Mm.
acid has to go into a, chemical resistant, uh, bath. So the tubs that they're made from polyethylene plastic. So
Mm.
I'm working in plastics, I'm working in chemicals, I'm working in like welding all this stuff together, toxic fumes everywhere. And I just couldn't stand like working with plastics, chemicals, and toxic fumes. So I said, I
Mm.
got to get out of here. I got to find, a way to get out of this job. So I actually got a newspaper, and there was a small, um, ad, in the classified sections, looking for model makers. And I had done some model
Mm.
making. I'd been model making all my life. And,
Yeah.
so I called the phone number, and they said, "Oh yeah, come on down. Interview. We're desperately looking for model makers." So I quit the, acid bath factory, that day, and drove down to get interviewed. And the guy's like, "Oh, what have you done?" And I showed him my resume, which wasn't very impressive, and I showed him some pictures of some models I made. And he said, "Great, you can start tomorrow." So I'm like so excited. I was going to work, in the movies now, building models. And, of course, I traded working with plastics, chemicals, and toxic fumes to work in a place that has plastics, chemicals, and toxic fumes. So, but it was exciting stuff. And, so I'm working away, and the guy next to, or this girl next to me, she's working, and I said, "I'm a model maker. What do you do?" And she says, "Oh, I'm a student at Cal Arts, which is a local,
Mm.
school
Yeah.
that, trains, animators and filmmakers." I said, "Oh, that's
Hmm.
nice. Not necessarily a professional model maker, but at least a student." And then, the guy next to me has got blonde hair and blue eyes, and I said, "I'm a model maker. What have you done? What have you been as a model maker?" And he says, "I am Dmitry. I'm a ballet dancer from Russia, and I've just landed here." And they were hiring anyone off the street, it turns out. So I was not very special. so, so I sort of like felt crestfallen, because I'm like, "Oh man, I'm just anybody." But, but it was fortunate, because the movie, that I was working on. I was building what we call wet for wet models, and it was for the movie The Abyss. So
Ah, yes.
my first big feature happened to be James Cameron's The Abyss, which is like a great movie in my opinion. Not because I
That's
worked
very
on it,
cool.
but
Yeah, yeah.
it's a fine film.
Yeah, it doesn't get much. There's not much talk about the Abyss these days, from maybe from a sort of visual effects perspective, in as much as you've got the water snake thing, and it's sort of a
Yeah,
precursor to Terminator 2 and therefore Jurassic Park. But there's some great work in that film in terms of effects and some really good performances as well. I remember getting that on VHS and then finding like the director's cut on Laserdisc, and I loved that film. Yeah, that's a great film.
yeah, no, I agree.
So what were you working on specifically on the Abyss?
So the company I was working for was called Wonderworks, which was run by a guy named Brick Price,
Mm,
and we were working on the wet for wet models, which meant that any model that was actually going to be put in the water, we were working on that. And I
mm,
specifically built at the beginning of the movie, the Montana, the Ohio class submarine, hits the rocks and floods.
mm,
And so me and one other model maker named Jim McGeechee built the engine room, which gets flooded,
mm,
and that was the thing. And that was my introduction to the movie business. And I remember to this day, the instructions were very simple. It was directly from James Cameron, and he said, "It's fifth scale. It's 10 feet long, 5 feet wide, 3 feet tall, nuclear submarine engine room, and there has to be a path down the middle that looks like people could run out."
mm,
And that was the instruction. So I
mm.
drew the thing. I designed it. I looked up, and it was very hard back then because the internet wasn't as robust as it is today. Uh, you know, Pictures of what the atomic engine looks like in a nuclear submarine, and kind of finagled that into this space. And Jim and I built that, and we got pretty much no direction other than that description I gave you, and built
Mm.
it. And then we shipped it out to South Carolina, where they shot the movie in a abandoned atomic reactor, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and and what's funny is that I used to work at a hobby shop in Pasadena, California. It was a train store called the Original Whistle Stop, and occasionally people would come in, and this one guy named Jim, older guy, would talk to me about how he's proud about his son because his son was a model maker and he worked in the movies, and he described all the things he worked on. And eventually I found out that Jim's son was a guy named Pat McClung, and Pat McClung
Yeah, I know Pat.
was a model builder and model and supervisor, and he actually worked on Aliens, and then he was the guy at the other end in South Carolina that I was sending the model to, that was running the
Mm.
shop for the Abyss. And so later, when Pat became a supervisor, we were able to work together. But it was kind of fun to sort of hear about Pat from Jim when I was just a clerk at a hobby shop, and then eventually make that connection again
Yeah.
professionally.
Yeah, he's a great model maker, isn't he, Pat? He's done some
Yeah.
wonderful stuff over the years. So you're in the industry then, like you've made it in by
Right.
this point. I mean, what was kind of striking to you in terms of what you had to achieve, or maybe even the speed at which you had to achieve it? I mean, was there anything that really sticks out to you that, you're in there, obviously you're enthusiastic and you're no doubt putting in the hours, but was there anything that really struck you that was different to your expectations?
Well, actually, back to the Abyss for a moment. The thing that was
Mm,
right away, the lesson was, you come in running. It's like here's the instructions, go. Oh, where's my bench? You got to build it. So there's sort of you just have to like make do and figure it out as you go, which goes back to our Super 8 days and playing with my brothers and trying to figure out things on the fly. Um, so the success, and there's also success and tragedy at the same time. In that success was building this engine room, shipping it off, and then finding out a year or so later from Pat, like, oh yeah, that was a good model. We really liked it, and that really worked well. But on the flip side, in that same movie, there was this notorious crane. Um,
mm,
I don't know if you know about that, but there's a scene where the crane gets pulled off of the Benthic Explorer, the ship, and it goes into the
yeah.
water. And there was another group building the crane, and the guy decided he would make it out of wax
Mm.
so it could crush. It's like, yeah, we can make it out of wax and it can crush. And the aforementioned Jim McGeechee was on that team, and the guy was going to build the thing out of wax. And Jim said, "I'm quitting. I'm going to go work at Disney," because Jim said wax floats, so you can't
Mm.
like expect this crane to go into the water and just not lift up to the surface. So sort of like a car accident where people are, pumping on the chest of the victim trying to get to revive them. I got kind of drawn into the crane fiasco and had to help finish this crane model to get it out the door. So I had my I had a hand involved in this crane, which we all knew was not going to work. Um, but got it out the door. So at the same time I'm doing the engine room, which was, sort of a success, I'm also working on the crane, which was not a success and had to be replaced eventually. So that was a great lesson on like humility, I guess, but also sort of like standing up a little bit and calling things out that aren't going to work. And I think I found throughout my career, I'm not necessarily the guy that knows the right thing to do.
Mm.
But if somebody tells me the wrong thing, I'll pick that out. Like I can that's my mutant power. Like everybody has like like a useless X-Men mutant power. My mutant power is to sniff out the mistakes, and eventually, if something doesn't sound wrong to me, I guess that's the right thing. So that's been useful throughout my career to sort of make sure that we're steered in the right direction by identifying the mistakes.
And talking of sort of steering in the right direction, I always wonder in some of these earlier movies, were you kind of privy to seeing some of the on-set footage from principal photography whilst you were working on these effects, so that you could hopefully kind of match the look and make it a sort of cohesive thing? Because I often have spoken to people that worked in VFX, and they're sort of isolated sometimes from the bigger picture. They're just so focused on their one shot or their one sequence. But on the Abyss, for instance, did you have the chance to see some of the photography?
Not on the Abyss. Again, I was very junior model maker at the time,
Yes.
and just got the thing done and shipped out, and never really heard until later. I talked to Pat about how it went at the other end.
Mm.
But fortunately for me, after I got the engine room done and after the crane went out the door, and I'm always very adamant about like making sure to complete the thing I'm working on, because
Mm.
I kind of feel for the people that I'm working for. At least I can complete this task. I'm not going to quit in the middle of a job, um,
Mm.
despite the pain of the crane. Um,
Yeah.
but then a friend of mine said, "Oh, you got to come over to Boss. They've got a project going, and they're paying better." So this is Boss Film, which is in Maria del Rey, California at the time. And that was Richard Edlund's company.
Hmm.
And so I went over and interviewed, and was very fortunate that I was again hired on the spot to work on a commercial. And the late Dave Jones was running the shop at the time, and Boss had been run by a guy named Mark Stetson for a while,
Mm.
and he had worked at EEG. He'd worked on Star Trek and Blade Runner and these other shows, and so I can sort of in awe of him a bit. But he was transitioning out. He was going to start his own company. So I was working at Boss. I got hired, and at some point, and this really worked out in my favor, I was working on this project. It was the abandoned Back to the Future film that Boss was working on, and Mark came over with David Jones's permission and asked if I'd work for him for a week on a music video, and that 1 week turned into 6 years. So I
Wow.
lucked out, sort of fell over backwards into the abyss, and then I sort of got uh, taken by under Mark's wing to work with him, and that's where things started changing in terms of like being a little bit more responsibility. And going back to your point about seeing the footage, getting to work with Mark and go to set and see live action and talk directly to the director about what he wanted to see and his vision, and really getting much more cognizant of how much you need to match what is being shot live action and with the miniature, so that our work becomes just more shots in the movie, more
Mm.
storytelling and less spectacle, if that makes sense. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
and then working with directors of photography who specialize in miniature work, who are, that's a very difficult position, because you have to be able to match the lighting of live action, but in our specialized manners, because we're shooting high speed, it has to be boost the light levels. We have to like
Yeah.
stop down, et cetera, et cetera. And so to see that level of, sort of concentration, commitment to get it right, again, sort of impressed upon me the need to up my game a little bit to work better, not just build nice models, but to actually create scenes and create shots that are telling the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Just going back 1 minute, did you say an abandoned Back to the Future film? Why don't I know about that?
And that's the part we cut out. No, this is true. So, Boss was doing a film for Universal, and it was the Back to the Future ride, and it was big. I think it was 65 millimeter large
Yeah.
format work, and we built a cave. We had a T-Rex. The camera was a snorkel lens that was supposed to be the point of view from the inside the DeLorean flying
Yeah.
in different time zones. So there, you go like very quickly from time. You
I
go to
remember
the
the ride.
prehistoric
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
yeah, for the ride, and then you end up like in an alternate future where there's like dirigibles and things like that,
Mm.
and ton of work done, just everything. And then I think eventually, though, conceptually, I think the Universal folks were like, yeah, it's not. We don't want to do this time jumping thing so much as we want to just sort of have you flying through the 2015 version of
Yeah.
of the future.
Hill Valley.
um
Yeah.
yeah, so eventually that was abandoned, and Mass Illusion, which was I think it was Mass Illusion, which was or Doug Trumbull's company back east, ended up doing the actual ride film that you see
Mm.
in the theme park.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that was another lesson. It's like you can go down this route and you can spend all this time and effort, and none of us were not putting our best effort forward to build
Mm.
and shoot. And then you creative folks decide, well, let's abandon this and let's go with something else entirely.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a hell of a lesson to take,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because you realize,
Right. And
and
so
it's difficult then to have. Well, for some people, I'm sure it would be difficult to then have enthusiasm for the next job, But you have to kind
right.
of pick yourself up and brush yourself off and start again.
I mean, we're all, as much as we, chronologically are adults, we're all still little kids at heart, drawing little, crayon pictures or whatever. And, we want to be patted on the head. And when you pick that up and you crumple it up and throw it away, that's how we feel emotionally, that your best efforts are being wasted. And it's hard to get that enthusiasm again.
Mm.
Um, but fortunately for me, I was Mark took me from that project, and I did a really terrible music video with him. It was really awful, and but then the next job, this is what enticed me to go work with Mark. I went over his house, and he's at his desk, and he's like, "Hey, look at this!" And he opens a drawer, and there were these amazing uh, um, Steve Berg drawings
Mm.
of Mars from from Total Recall, and and that's what I said. Okay, he says, "You want to work on this?" I said, "Yeah, I do." So he drew me in, and we got to work on Total Recall, um, which off and on was over a year's worth of work. Um,
Really?
Well, because they were shooting in Mexico, and there was this one
Mm.
scene where uh, they needed background plates. They were still doing a rear projection at the time, and so we had to build a miniature and shoot the background for these background plates so they could have them on set while they were shooting live action. So we did that, and then we took a break from Total Recall, and we did, I think, Dick Tracy and some other movies in there, and then we came back to Total Recall to do all the exteriors. So that was like a very busy period, and like again, it's like, oh, I just happened to be working on the Total Recall and Dick Tracy and all these other shows that Mark was able to run with us. So I felt again very fortunate that he took me under his wing, and he gave me a lot of responsibility, and I sort of quickly moved up from being just a junior model maker to like a lead model maker, and then eventually to actually what we called a crew chief, which was a guy that ran the particular project. Um, so while I was just a model maker on Total Recall, it was the lead model maker on the bridge for Dick Tracy, and
Mm.
then eventually they started giving me full projects to run, which meant I would be the lead model maker, but I'd have a team of people below me to
Nice.
run the project.
I would imagine doing all of this, the kind of early work, like you mentioned, Total Recall. There, am I? Is this a bad memory of mine, or do I have a memory deep embedded in from a commentary or an article that I read about using Coke cans?
I knew it would come up. I should have avoided this podcast
Is
completely.
this one that comes up all the time? Because I've
Yes, it
definitely heard this.
does.
Oh, well, listen, we don't have to cover it.
No, no, no. I want to talk. I want to confess about the Coke can. So, so we're working on, like it said, off and on over a year, working on Total Recall. We're
Mm,
building all these amazing models. It's like very hard work to build these canyons and these miniatures, and they were really small scale miniatures to get this vastness of Mars out there. And after all this time, we had a model, and it was kind of a goofy shot. So it's one of the last shots we did, and it's when the atmosphere has come over Mars, and the people walk out for the first time and take a breath in
mm,
the new air of Mars. And so we built this miniature, and uh, somehow along the way, the communication was that we were building in quarter inch to the foot, which is 48th scale.
mm,
And somehow they thought they were getting a quarter scale model, which would be much bigger, much bigger.
mm,
So to sort of scramble to make it slightly bigger, we took these models, which are all spaceship or space building models, and we started gluing on bigger scale, like doors and windows and railings or whatever, to them to boost their scale appearance on camera without actually physically making bigger models, if that makes sense.
mm, mm,
And I remember the shot because they were using RP again, so they've got a window that's blown out, and people walk out and take a breath, and it's all rear projection inside of our miniature. And we kept shooting it, and we do it like 3 or 4 times. And I'm again just a model maker, but they kept getting the scale of the people wrong
mm.
because as soon as the second person walked out, it looked like their head was hitting the top of the window. So they keep shooting it, and it would keep getting the wrong scale. And finally, I had to mention this to them, raise my voice, and I said, "You do know that the first person walking out is a little person." Like, what? It's like, well, in the movie, there's a prostitute, and she's a little person.
Mm.
So she's not normal height. She's shorter. And they said, "Oh, right. So you're scaling the projection the wrong scale based on the first appearance, which is this little person walking out." So they finally adjusted the scale of the projection to match her height, and it worked out from there. Anyway, back to the Coke can. So 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 we built these things, and I'm scrambling to we're going to shoot in an hour, so I'm scrambling to put some detail on there. And I finally took some Coke cans, and I made like a series of propane tanks on the top of a model building. But from the
Mm.
front, I detailed it with hatches and ladders and rivets and everything. So it looked completely legitimate from the front. But from the back, you could tell they were Coke cans. You could see where you'd cook your drink from.
Mm.
And after a year working on this movie, that's the day that they sent an electronic press kit, a camera, and this woman to interview us about building models for this movie. And here we are, scrambling to get this thing done. She walks in. The first thing she sees is the back of these Coke cans where you take your drink. And she's like, "Oh, so are every one of these models made like from Coke cans and popsicle sticks and egg cartons?" I'm like, Jesus, lady, this is hard work.
You've just undermined your entire industry.
Exactly, right. Again, crestfallen, like, wind knocked it out of me, and just horrible feeling. So the last shot we're doing is where Arnold says to Rachel Ticotin, like, "Kiss me before I wake up." And you see the vastness of Mars. And I just literally took a Coke can, hit it with some gray auto primer, and stuck it in the middle of the set. Right out in broad daylight, if you will, on set. And if you watch the movie to this day, if you know where to look, which is to the right of screen right of Arnold's hip, it's there. And since then, I always try to put, quote unquote Easter eggs into the movies, and the Coke can became a very popular one. There's a Coke can in Waterworld. There's a Coke can in Inception. There's a Coke can in Interstellar.
Sounds like you should have got yourself some sponsorship here, Ian.
Exactly. Well, the trick is you can't actually tell it's a Coke can. That became the challenge, was how to integrate this shape and this detail without being obvious. But the thing is like somehow that got around, maybe because I was boasting too much about it. But we went to work on Alien Romulus, and Fede Alvarez, the director, came to meet with me. And he had talked to Pat McClung, and the first thing he said was like, "So where are you going to put the Coke can?" Like, they know my trick,
Now I feel bad bringing it up.
No, it's great.
It is great. It's such a great little story.
It's a stress reliever, because here we are trying to do this like serious stuff and trying to be good at what we're doing, and a commitment to storytelling. But sometimes at the end of the day, you just got to, relieve a little bit. So you got to throw some jokes in there. So, like famously, I think in the Star Wars Rebel Blockade Runner, if you look in the cockpit, there's like a pinup.
Yeah, and the other one I think of is Ken Ralston putting the potato in the asteroid field. And putting a Nike sneaker in the battle in Return of the Jedi, because it was just like, nobody's going to see it, and it's a lot quicker than building another model. That's part of your job, is to know shortcuts as well, right? It's to know what the camera is able to perceive and the audience is able to perceive. And you've got to work to time, you've got to work to budget, and no doubt there are many other things that should have been simple and end up getting incredibly complex and eating through your schedule. So you do have to be able to adapt, don't you?
Yeah, and Mark taught me a couple of, not hard and fast rules, but he said, basically 90% of what we do doesn't end up on screen in terms of like being perceived. But if we don't do it, you're going to tell that it's not there. And I like to call it the connective tissue. Like, we did a shot for this movie called The Shadow, and we built a bunch of city streets, and we're lighting it and setting it up. And we're going in, and I'm taking soapy water, and I'm spraying the street to get it wetted down. And then he went outside into the parking lot, and he comes back, and he's got a coffee cup full of just gravel and dirt that was in the parking lot. And he starts throwing it into the gutters and brushing it in with a little brush. And he gives me the cup, and he says, do this. Because it's the thing, you don't perceive a lot of trash and detritus and the imperfection of the world, because we just sort of take it for granted. But if we don't put it into the movie, we don't put it in the model, we don't put it in the dressing, then your mind subconsciously knows there's something missing, something not quite right.
Yeah, and there's a feeling, isn't there? You can't quite put your finger on, but it just isn't right. Yeah. When you're working for a director like, let's say, there's a bit of a fight going on in the background there.
Yes, there is. By the way, I have pet pigs.
Oh, right.
So,
Well, this just adds a bit of ambience. It's all good.
yeah, sorry about that.
No, all good. What was I going to say? Let me just gather my thoughts. Yeah. Um,
Let me see if I can walk outside. It may be I'm not tied to the
fine.
computer at the moment.
Good sound effects going on here. Tell me when you're happy.
Oh yeah, we're good.
Yeah, so tell me what it's like working for a director like Tim Burton, who has he has a certain, a particular understanding of miniatures and animation and what looks good on film. And was he somebody who would come in and kind of scrutinize your work? Did he have his hands on all of that film, the live action as well as the model stuff?
So yeah, he very much is involved in all aspects in terms of the design and look of the movie. In this particular case, I worked on Batman Returns, and then also Edward Scissorhands. And
Yes.
Edward Scissorhands for me is one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah.
I like the movie a lot, and we actually built not only just a suburb, but the most mundane, boring suburb you could have possibly imagined. They actually made the houses more bland than they really were in real life. So we got to duplicate the suburb that they had in Florida in miniature, and it was fun for me to sort of make something interesting out of something so boring. and and I think that was, I could see his upbringing and desire, and like seeing the world that he must have lived in, because he's a local kid too, to Southern California, and trying to find something more mysterious and interesting, which is the Scissorhands castle. So I didn't work on the castle model. That was a guy named Dana Yursich who worked on that. But we built the neighborhood, and that was a lot of fun. And sort of one of my, again, prouder shots I was involved with was in the movie. Winona Ryder is an older woman. She's a grandma, and she's talking to her grandchild about Scissorhands, and it's snowing outside, and we know that's Edward up at the house. And you go through the bedroom window and out over the neighborhood. And
Yes.
That's an in-camera shot. That's our 24 scale model outside the window of the set, with real, snow shakers doing it. And again, it's this very simple, straightforward technique, but very effective and kind of charming that we could pull that off. But Rick Heinrichs is his art director, and they were, I guess, friends at CalArts again. So Rick, we were actually directly talking to Rick more often about the work, and with Bo Welch on Batman Returns. Tim wouldn't come down personally to see what we were doing, but certainly his hand is in the zoo for Batman Returns, which I got to build and had a lot of fun doing.
Cool.
Nothing like building something and then blowing it up.
Yeah. But you know what always worries me about that? It's not, I mean, it's one thing to spend all this time on something and blow it up and see it destroyed, which, there's, if it works, great. My concern would be, what if it doesn't blow up quite right?
Yeah. So that actually happened to us, strangely enough. So we were building that model, and people say, don't you feel bad about building all this model for all this time and all the effort these guys put in, and then you're going to destroy it. And I said, well, but it's a piece of performance art, really. I
Mm.
mean, we're intending to blow it up. I feel
Mm.
bad if we don't destroy it. I mean,
Yeah.
its reason to exist was to get wiped out. So the zoo model, there was a polar bear on top of the penguin enclosure,
Mm.
and we did a test. And oh, by the way, I got one of the greatest compliments from Tim Burton, I have to say.
Oh yeah.
Let me talk about myself. We,
Do it.
we did a test because we wanted to show the explosions, and so we took some steel decks and we set up a snowy field, and we put tree models that we built, and we planted these mortars inside, and we shot it at high speed, showing explosions going off as if the penguin rockets are hitting the zoo and blowing it up. And we got done, and we sent the test in for them to review to make sure they were going the right direction. And Tim Burton's response was, "Where did you shoot this?"
Hmm.
Not the model looks good or those work really
Wow.
well in scale. Just where did you shoot this? And I said, okay, we've done our job, because he thinks we're
Amazing.
looking at a real shot. So,
That's very cool.
so we moved, we moved on there. So anyway, we're building the penguin lair, and we've got this polar bear on top. And this guy named Tully Summers sculpted this beautiful polar bear with its claws out, looking really scary. And it's made of plastic resin. And the late Joe Viscoso was doing our pyro, and he put a bomb inside of it for a test. We put a bomb inside it, and it was going to explode. It was going to blow up and shatter in a million pieces. So we roll the camera, high-speed camera, hit the button, poof. The bomb doesn't go off. Just the little pack of, like, for the flames. So instead of it blowing up into 1,000 pieces, it just stupidly fell over, and flames came out the back of its feet. Right?
Yeah.
So we're thinking, oh, that's a failure. Oh, Christ. Well, we'll do it again. Tomorrow we'll do it again. Fail. Polar bear falls over. Flame came out of its feet. Tim Burton loved it. He said, oh, that looks fantastic. That's really funny. Do it again. And suddenly we had to figure out how to recreate the mistake.
Why it went wrong. Yeah.
Right? Like, what do we do? Like, so it was actually a much bigger engineering issue to figure out how to make it fall over and the flames come out of its feet, and do a forensic evaluation of what we did to sort of recreate the mistake over and over again. But that was that's a happy accident, we sort of call them, which is where you do something like that and it doesn't work, but it actually results with something that was better than you had intended.
Yeah, that's a really key part of what I love about practical effects, I think, is those accidents and those things you discover by accident, which don't necessarily happen in the computer. I mean, I'm sure they sometimes do, because you'll get a rendering issue or something. But with practical, you're sort of, in the world of physics and chemistry, and sometimes that is unpredictable, and you just have to kind of adapt. I think that's what I've always loved about that side of movie making.
Yeah, with the working with Chris Nolan in the past, it's often the case where we're building I don't want to call it a sandbox, but we're building a simulation. And so we're gonna try to build most of the conditions that will cause this simulation occur, but it's a real simulation. It's an actual physical event going on. And then we become more like documentarians. We're setting up cameras, we're shooting this. We have an intention in general of what's going to happen, but there are things that are going to happen just by the nature of the explosions and the physics, like you described. And so we're going to record that, and we're going to get those results that are, just by their nature, much more realistic and much more dramatic, if you will. But you're right. People working in digital animation, it takes a lot of thinking and a lot of planning and a lot of forethought to design that randomness, if you will, into the animation, and be cognizant of it. In the physical world, that comes naturally. So Um, I think, there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, CG these days isn't as good, as it was back in whatever." And I'm like, no, it's actually great. But
Mm,
bad CG is bad CG. It's like
yes.
good CG is like in um, decipherable from real life if it's really good,
Yeah.
and bad CG is bad. But you know, bad physical effects still are there's still something to them. It's still a real thing you're seeing. So
Yeah.
I don't, I'm not a much of a practitioner in CG, but I'm not a guy who knocks CG. I
No.
think the fact that digital effects, in terms of compositing, in terms of smoothing, in terms of using morphing tools to correct, in terms of doing augmentation, I think
Hmm.
from a physical guy, like, oh my God, CG's great. You can
Yeah.
leave the rods in and paint them out. It's just
Yes.
those are the pluses.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, you only really notice CG, bad CG, when it is bad. You don't notice it
Right.
when it's good. You just, you just buy. I mean, there are so many films now that have, obviously, with digital effects that people wouldn't even know was a digital effect.
Hmm.
Maybe there's just one thing that stood out to them on a character or something, because those are the things that we look at every day. We look at people, we look at animals, and I think people are very good at identifying when something kind of feels fake. Although I've been to the cinema with some of my friends and I've said, "Wow, I didn't quite buy that XYZ," and they're like, "Really? Why?" They don't
Oh,
see it. So there are people like me who do pick over these things a bit more, and obviously people like you who have an eye for it. It's part of your well, it's part of your X-Men super skills there, your superhero skills. But what do you think, like going back to some of those early movies that you worked on, what do you think really kind of separated the good from the bad at that time? Because there are some of those movies that still really stand up, and there are others that really don't. And obviously that could be for budgetary and scheduling and for time reasons, whatever. But was there anything that you kind of really honed in on, which could really sell the miniature that you were building?
um, yeah, it's funny. A lot of model makers would come to us and they show us their work, and they were very proud of like an X-wing that they may have built, or like, here's a studio scale model. By the way, I hate the
Mm.
term studio scale. I hate it. I hate it. Um, because we actually build things to a scale. So we're, like,
Yes.
we're going to build this in 6, or we're going to build this in 24th, or whatever. And
Yeah.
so when people say studio scale, it's like, no, we actually make them a specific size. But
It could be any scale. Yeah.
right. But one of the things we always emphasize to them is, it's like, stop looking at someone else's version of real life. Stop looking at like pictures of models built for movies,
Mm.
which can be fantastic, but you should go to the source. You should go to the prototype, which is real life. So
Mm.
we did a movie called Pitch Black, and
Yeah.
my partner Matthew Gratzner designed the spaceship, and I storyboarded this crash sequence at the beginning of the movie. But for the spaceship, we referenced freight trains and C-130 Hercules transport planes and items like that, to look for the kind of detail, the kind of discoloration and age that you would expect to find uh,
Mm.
on an industrial piece of machinery, and apply that real world analog to the miniatures that we were building, to
Mm.
give them that real world feel. And again, sort of another a backhanded compliment we got was, we worked on the X-Files movie, and that was one of my favorite projects we ever did. And there's near the beginning of the movie, there's a federal building that explodes and blows up as a bomb inside the basement, and it collapses.
Oh yeah.
And um so we built the model. There wasn't a huge budget for it, so we had to be very careful figuring out how to shoot it, which was shoot it in the sequence that was going to be destroyed, because it's pre-disastered. It's already got damage to it. Um,
Pre-disastered. I've not heard
yeah,
that term before. I like
our term.
that.
So the wall is already missing. The floors are already damaged and everything. But the way it's cut together is, you go from a live action shot of a fireball going off, then you cut to a miniature insert of the wall collapsing, and then you cut to the wide shot, and the wall is sort of already fallen, and the fireball has come up, exposing this pre-disaster building that's on fire.
Mm.
So by being very careful in the edit, we were able to pull this off and fool people into thinking they'd actually seen the whole building collapse, when in fact
Hmm.
it's just done very cleverly in the edit. But we referenced the Oklahoma City bombing photographs and quite a bit in terms of like the detail on the walls and the floors and everything. It sort of showed how it came down. And the late Roger Ebert, in his review of the movie, said the scene with the exploding federal building should have been left out of the movie because it was so reminiscent of what happened in Oklahoma City.
Hmm.
And again, he's not saying this effect, he's not saying the model, he's
Mm.
saying that scene. And
Yeah.
so we've gotten past the technique and we've gotten
Yeah.
into the emotion. And, you know, that's the thing we're always trying to do, is what is going to get to the audience. You know, when I read a
Yeah.
script, I'll pick out shots. So this is going to go in the trailer. This is going to go in the trailer. And of course, it's a lot of stuff that we get to work on. We never see any of the money, but
Mm.
but I can usually pick out like, oh, this shot's going to be in the trailer because that's what they're going to use to sell people to get to the movie to see it.
Yeah.
But trying to figure out what that emotional element is that's going to sell it and going to get to people, I think is an important thing. I mean, I had nothing to do with it, but it was impressed me quite a bit in The Dark Knight when they flipped that truck over, and to see
Mm.
that in IMAX, you know, 5 stories tall and the truck flipping over, it's an amazing shot, and it's very straightforward, very simple, but it's very impactful.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're all filmmakers at the end of the day, right? You've all got to think like a filmmaker, but you've also got to think as the audience, and what would the audience want to see, and would they buy it, and all of those things. But working for Chris Nolan, I would imagine that took things to another level in many ways, because he's a very particular filmmaker. His ethos, of course, is, you know, if you can do it in camera, then do it in camera. Was that something that kind of delighted you as a prospect when you first worked for him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, you know, it was we'd been working a long time, and my partner Matthew and Shannon Gans, you know, been doing a lot of movies, and we're always trying to do a good job, because
Mm.
Matthew would say, you know, the money goes away, but we're always going to be, what's going to be left is the work we did. So we just, you know,
Yeah.
always try to go in on the day to do the best work. And working with Chris is, how to put it, he's collaborative, and then he wants to hear from you how to do something and what you might want to do. But he's
Hmm.
also a director, because at the end of the conversation, he will then tell you what he wants to do.
Mm.
And for my guys, my crew, the crew that I've had in the past, you know, we kind of hone down to the specific guys who are sort of in the same uh, thought process and work ethic that we are, which is try to do your best job, or try to like bring your A team, your A game, if you will.
Mm.
And for them, it was great too, because now they've got somebody who really appreciates what they're doing. You know, that was really, um, they felt more inclined to put more effort in and try to do it right, knowing that they have a director who's appreciating that effort. So for
Mm.
all of us, you know, my other partner Shannon Gans would say at the beginning of a job, we'd have a little prep rally or pep talk, and she would say, you know, bring your A game, because he does, and he's trusting us to do the best job that we can, and we've got to like do it, and we've got to respect someone who is um, believing in this system, you know, especially believes in doing it physically, when there's a world of people just sort of deflecting to CG. Um, and again, like I said, I love CG. I'm not knocking CG, but there's a laziness sometimes to filmmakers who just like, you know, we'll just,
See it as a fix. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know what I want back there, so we'll just put a green screen up, and eventually we'll figure it out.
Mm.
Versus somebody who's like clearly understands how this all works, and clearly can tell you what he wants to see, and knows that. That's the other thing about him, is that when we would shoot any of these scenes, any of these shots, they're a full length. The
Mm.
car, the Batmobile hitting the garbage truck is all a full length series of shots, or
Mm.
the hospital collapsing in Inception, is, from beginning to end is the whole sequence. Because he edits these miniature visual effects shots into his movie as he would edit any other shot.
Mm.
He picks the moments, or he cuts back to it, or whatever he wants to do. He doesn't want to be restricted by us just shooting inserts. He wants
Yeah.
a full sequence so that he has the flexibility to cut it in as if he was shooting it live action.
Mm.
Um, and that's something too, which is now we have to make sure that the work, the shot works beginning to end. Um, on Inception, we had, I think, 4 cameras, or actually 5. He added another camera, and that whole sequence of explosions in real time was five. It was like 5 seconds, but we were shooting 60 FPS, so we're getting 15 seconds of running footage
Mm.
that he's able to cut as needed. So that's something that it raises the bar for us to be able to make sure that our work is able to sustain itself for that amount of time, and there's always something happening, and it's not screwing up some point in the middle of the sequence or whatever.
Yeah.
um but really refreshing to have someone who knows what we're doing. He and I would discuss frame rates. Most directors have no clue as to what speed you shoot a miniature at, but based on the
Mm.
scale, you want to go a particular frame rate. So it was great to converse with somebody who knows the business, knows the particulars in and outs of this particular niche of effects, and then is able to give you really direct answers as to what he wants to see.
Mm. And how like on those Nolan movies? I mean, I spoke to Nathan Crowley on this podcast
Ah,
a couple of years ago. Do you have much interaction with Nathan as production designer when you're doing work on the Nolan movies?
yeah, quite a bit.
Mm.
Nathan and I have worked also on First Man,
Yeah.
and he's very involved. Again, not just doing the live action, but uh, involved in the miniature effects also, because that's going to be part of his movie. And fortunately for me, I think, having worked with him a few times, there's a certain level, like of trust and shorthand. We were able to meet and go over things, and he's able to sort of hand some of that off to me. And as long as I keep checking in with him and make sure it's up to his standards, we're able to move along. And
Mm.
again, this is one of those things, for the Conception, as a for instance, they built the big set in Calgary, Canada, of the Fortress Hospital. It wasn't the
Mm.
full hospital, but it was like the tower and a couple of floors. So I went up there and photographed the heck out of it, and used that information to build a miniature, so that we were matching the paint color and the aging and texture and um, everything else. And we actually calculated the sun angle on the day that we did our photography, so that
Huh. Nice.
we would match the lighting that was in Canada on that day. So it was set up in our parking lot in a very weird, skewed angle, but that was very specific, so that we could shoot at a specific time of day on a specific date, just to get the lighting to match. And
Mm.
that's the kind of attention to detail and care that we wanted to apply, so that our shots interact with the live actions. And then that's another sequence where they started with a live action explosion, then they cut to the wide shots, which is our miniature. And we just want to make sure that it's a good match, so that the audience isn't taken out of the movie, but is just caught up in the drama.
And it's so important to have that kind of crossover between the departments to better each other's work. But I mean, that obviously wasn't always the case. Sometimes you're just hunkered down essentially in a
Yeah.
dark room and just doing your bit. But what does it take for that to happen? And is that a transition you felt that has happened in more recent years, where people begin to understand what tools are best for what shot, and that they all interact together? Does it take somebody like Chris Nolan to kind of push that, or Damien Chazelle, or does it feel like does it feel like there was a transition at some point in terms of your career where that was more prevalent?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say the modern directors, but these directors like Damien and Chris, and I'm going to go back to even we worked a lot with a director named David Toohey that
Mm,
want to get more involved and want to be part of the visual effects process also, because they know it's part of their movie too, and not just turn it over to somebody else. That's where you get the collaboration, and that's where you get the comfort zone of them accepting that you're not trying to like go into this basement and work on your own and be separate from them. You're actually trying to be part of the film. Um, that you're, we've wasn't me as much as my partner Matthew Ratzner, but we've shot a lot for Martin Scorsese.
mm,
And while there were visual effects work involved, we actually shot a lot of live action for him too, because um, he has a long editing period, and
mm.
he'll identify like inserts, or Martha Schumacher, his editor, will
Yeah.
say, oh, we need this shot or we need this shot, and we're
Yes.
the last guy standing with a camera that's running, so we'll get a lot of list of inserts to do or shots to do, and we'll end up doing them, and of course doing our darndest to match the style and lighting that
Mm,
had been done in the live action. And so there's this trust at that point, like, oh, these guys can handle this part of it. So they're not just the effects guys, they're actually, like you said earlier, filmmakers who are part of the process. And
mm.
whether it's inserts or whether it's explosions, or whether it's, Mr. French driving into the trailer in The Departed, which is a miniature shot. Um, we're there as part of the filmmaking.
Yeah, yeah. That must be so. I love that approach by Scorsese, and I mean, even Spielberg does that. I hear. I mean, he did it way back when in Jaws. He would watch screenings and go, "We need one more jump scare. Let's
Right.
get some wood and a hose and a hammer and make it look like the shark's bursting through the hull of the boat." And Scorsese's obviously taken that kind of early filmmaking ethos with him as well, and having that trusted partner in Thelma, just saying, "Hang on, Marty, we need this." And then you having the opportunity to shoot those things, that's very cool. I mean, I think that people just have this assumption that a film is shot, then it goes into post-production, and it's a one-way street. But being able to have that two-way street must be so important to fully realize the film that the director wants.
And the one other sort of nice moment, at least sequence, or for the sequence for us, was on Interstellar, where we used a director of photography named Tim Angulo, and I've worked with Tim for years and years, and he shot Dark Knight work for us,
Mm,
and so forth. And when we're on Interstellar, we had previs, CG animation done in Maya to work with, and we were able to take all the camera moves, digital camera moves, and translate those into moves that we could use on our motion control rig.
hmm,
And so we are very carefully, frame accurately following these previs shots. And we
mm,
shot for maybe a week that way on the ship, the Endurance. And Chris Nolan's looking at the footage, and we got the note back from him. He asked, "Well, are we following the previs?" And we said, "Oh, absolutely. Frame accurately, we're following the previs." And he said,
mm,
"Stop doing that." Like, what? He said, "Previs is some guy at a computer on a Friday trying to get the shot out the door. He's not there. He doesn't have the model in front of him. It's not lit. So he's just trying to figure it out on his own what to
mm,
do. But if the point of the shot is to see the engines light up, or the ship dock, or whatever the case is, if you guys are there and you see a better angle or a better speed or a better, move that tells the story better than what is in the previs, do that instead."
hmm.
And that was a great, like, sort of liberation for us, because
Yeah.
now we could actually use our skills as filmmakers, and my camera operator could actually operate a camera, and my DP could actually light a scene. And it turned out that we were actually shooting faster by using that approach. And many of the shots that were going to, at one time, were going to be digital in Interstellar, shifted over to the miniature side.
Mm.
So it increased our shot count because we were able to shoot at a better rate. And that was just, great for us because now we've got more work in the movie, and he's more satisfied, I hope, with the work that was coming out.
It's nice that he's put that trust in you, and clearly he often works with the same or a similar crew because you want to carry that kind of shorthand forward. I always talk about that on this podcast. I work in live TV, and just walking onto a job where I recognize everybody and I've worked with them before, you're going to have hopefully a good time because you know that how each other works, and you've sort of finished each other's sentences, and it's so important in something like movie making, isn't it, to have
Yeah.
that shorthand.
I've been fortunate to work on a couple of Coen Brothers movies, and when they were together, they were like that, finishing each other's sentences and sort of being very in sync in terms of their direction. Um, when I read the script for First Man, I had a meeting and I drew some storyboards just off the fly of like the spaceships and the docking scenes and stuff like that. And and I thought it should be more of a documentary style, like as if we're attaching the cameras to the spaceships, so we'd only see it as if there was a actual NASA technician who put a camera on the ship, and that's how you would see everything. So there'd never be any kind of Star Wars flying through space shots. It'd always be like a documentary
Mm.
style, and either very tight on the ship or very wide, as if you're looking at it from another spaceship or a satellite or something. And the first time we meet Damien, he comes in, and the first thing he says is, "So I want this to be like a documentary. I want to imagine that we're attaching the cameras to the spaceships, and so we'd never see anything other than like really close, right on the spaceship, or very wide, as if you're seeing it from another spaceship, but never anything like a Star Wars flying through shot, right?"
Hmm.
And I whipped the book open. And I said, "You mean like this?" And I'm showing him my storyboards. He's like, "Yeah, like this one. This one's too wide. This one's not tight enough. But we immediately were in sync in terms of like what the style was going to be for the
Mm.
photography. And I think that was great that we were able to establish that because he was busy making the movie. We were shooting that in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. And so I had my own stage, and we built the models and we set them up to photograph them. And before we started photographing all the scenes, I got maybe a 20-minute meeting with him where he was able to sit down and go through the sequence with me in very detailed manner. He did an animatic showing exactly what he wanted, and it was all cut to a piece of music that had been written. So most of the sequence is not just shots, but it's actually shots played to music and timed to music. Um, and once we had that, that meeting, and we established that we had the style that he wanted, it was up to me to take it and just go and shoot it. And I felt, again, really good that we were able to come up with this shorthand approach and match the style that he wanted, and be able
Mm.
to, be trusted to turn over the work to without having to have him sit on our shoulder all the time, because we were doing exactly what we had discussed.
That must be such a relief for a director to be able to do that. Because there's so much going on for a director every day. To having to scrutinize everything in every department must be utterly exhausting. But you're right, you're absolutely right. How important that feeling is that you get from those shots, the emotion that invokes, that isolation and the sort of claustrophobia of it all. And, that wouldn't have worked if you'd have had big sweeping balletic 2001 type shots all the time, or flybys, Star Wars flybys, like you say. But no, I think that's a great movie. I saw that in IMAX when it came out. What was that, 2018? I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
think
right.
it was 2018. I don't know if I saw it on IMAX or just at a very big screen, but I remember it's one of those films that I really felt sort of enveloped me. I didn't even think about looking at my watch. I was just totally engrossed by it. Um, One of the things I was going to ask you about that, because about 2018, that LED technology started to emerge in the industry. I think Mandalorian, obviously, being one of the big proponents of that. But you shot some of the miniatures, didn't you, against large scale LEDs, didn't you?
Yeah, there was a handful of shots in First Man that were done on the LED screen. the majority of it, because it's deep space, and when you're actually, in deep space, if you're being front lit or whatever, side lit by the sun, it actually blows out the stars, so you're actually almost always in black. Um, so we shot those in a more traditional motion control method where we put velvet up and velvet over the model mover and shot that. Um,
In your shed
with,
with your brothers, yeah?
yes, with the holes punched out. Um, so we did most of the shots that way, but there's a handful of shots where they get to close to the moon, which were done on the LED screen, but also one, the LED screen, in addition to the screen, had a key light on a robot arm, so it could actually move over. So there's a shot where the sun has come up and sort of glances over the surface of the Apollo capsule. And those particular shots we did against the LED screen.
Mm.
Um, so it's in camera. Um, and I think the LED screen method is fantastic. I'm a coming from rear projection and front projection. I'm sort of like, oh, this is just a. Everybody thinks it's amazing. It's like, well, it is amazing, but it's the same technique, just in a better
Yeah.
method. Um, but I'm a big proponent of it. And when we did that, we were in Stuttgart doing something called the Sparks. Was it Sparks Festival, which is a visual
Yeah.
effects and computer graphics animation festival. And we're presenting First Man, and Michelle, who is the VFX producer, explains everything shot in the LED screen and everything. And one of the questions was, well, wasn't that more expensive than if we shot it against a green screen? And she said, no, it's less expensive, actually. And that's the things, like, that's when you finally get to producers, when you say it's less expensive, because they don't want to, they don't care about the technique. They don't care about like how much it's better for the filmmaker or whatever. They just want to know what the cost ramifications are. And when you understand that, it can be less expensive because it's mostly in camera and you can, sort of move on. The trick, of course, is you have to plan. You have to pre-render your
Yes. Mm.
backgrounds in order for it to work. So you need directors who are able to articulate and come up with that plan of action. Um, that's the tricky thing, is, getting somebody to commit to what they're going to see and put out there.
Yeah, it's a really good point. What when you're working with like Damien and Chris, obviously they're both very visual directors, and they want that authenticity of the physical in camera shot where possible. Where does that divide between aesthetics and physics come though with those directors? Because obviously they're trying to recreate something that we can really buy, and it's not in a fantasy world necessarily. I mean, obviously Interstellar obviously goes into
Mm-hmm.
that as well, but where does that divide happen though, that aesthetic versus physics?
Um, I
It's a
think
difficult
the
question. It's a difficult question with a
right.
difficult answer.
I think the aesthetic always wins out.
Mm,
You just have to convince the aesthetic that it appears to be physically driven, that it appears to be realistic.
that it
But
feels right. Yeah.
yeah, but going back to what you'd said about, the spaceship shots in First Man, we're attaching the cameras to them. We're sticking too close to it, as if you were there. But it's still about the isolation. It's still about the, strapping yourself into a tin can and going up to space. So you still have to get that emotion across. And um, one of the sort of cheats that we used on Interstellar was, well, we put uh, Canada arms on the spaceship, on the Endurance, and so you can't really
Mm,
see them. But imagine, those Canada arms which they used on the space shuttle, which was these manipulator arms. And so if you were a director of photography and you actually could go into space and you actually had a Canada arm available to you that you could stick a camera on, you would think this was the greatest crane in the world, that you could do anything you want in space with it. So we used that as an excuse to stick the camera away from the model a little bit and be able to move it as if it was on a Canada arm, because that's what a DP would have done,
mm,
um, and justify wider shots as needed, or moves as needed. So they're not radical moves. They're all within the, I don't know, 10 meters of travel in scale that this arm could have traveled. So, our motion control moves are relatively small, but they still feel realistic because that's what that crane could have done. Um,
Mm.
but to answer your question, yeah, I think the aesthetic wins out over the realism, but you want to make it feel realistic to get the audience to buy it.
Mm. Oh, and what dictates the scale in which you make a model and photograph model? I mean, I imagine it's a whole bunch of things, but if you take, for instance, First Man, where you've got, is it the Gemini, isn't it? That was like what, 6 scale or something. And then the Saturn V is like 1/30th scale, and then you've got an aircraft, that rocket plane as well. I mean, how they're not interacting with each other necessarily, so they don't have to be the same scale. So how do you
Right.
decide? Is it based on the shot, the closeness of the camera? Is it based on having a more realistic weight to it and therefore making it bigger? What are those? What's the sort of criteria there?
Yeah, it's what its function's going to be and how close you get. The Apollo, we actually didn't end up building the Gemini capsule. That was a full scale prop that was shot against the LED screen. But we built the Apollo
Mm,
and the lunar module and the command module, which is the part they went to the moon with.
mm,
And we actually built the third stage of the rocket also, where the doors open and the ship comes out, where it's sort of containing the lunar module. So those were built in a pretty large scale, mostly because we were going to be putting the camera quite close to the surface, and we wanted the detail to hold up and be able to hold focus on that. And then, as you mentioned, the Saturn, which is this incredibly tall rocket with its gantry, was built in a smaller scale because we would tend to see that almost always in wide, full frame shots.
mm,
One of my favorite shots we did actually for that was near the end, after they cut the movie together. We came back and we shot the reveal of the Saturn rocket when it's leaving the vehicle assembly building, and it goes out into the sunlight. And we actually set that up in a parking lot in the sun, and then we took a crane with some black flags to flag off the sun. And then instead of moving the model, we actually pulled the crane back, and the flags revealed the sunlight hitting it. And that was composited with a real shot done inside the real vehicle assembly building. So that was a nice sort of just very simple, majestic shot of the Saturn reveal. On Interstellar, we would have gone maybe slightly bigger on the Endurance spaceship, but the size of that, which was still 14 feet across, this 15th scale, was dictated by the height of my stage. So,
mm.
so I needed to be able to shoot it in my stage and put black around it. So I sort of like guessed or estimated the biggest I could build that model and still be able to shoot it within the confines of my space. But if you're doing something where it has to get destroyed or fire or whatever, then you go much bigger. For the Ranger spaceship in Interstellar that gets destroyed, that not to ruin it for anyone who's never seen the movie, Matt Damon is on board. That was a 5th scale model, quite a bit bigger, and we shot that outdoors with a high-speed camera, and did pyro for it. So that was dictated by the action, which was the destruction. Everything else we were able to do with a smaller model.
That makes sense. Now, get your trumpet ready because you're going to have to blow your own trumpet now to answer this
Okay.
question. Why do you think you survived the industry when so many other physical model making shops kind of fell by the wayside? I mean, what was it that really gave you longevity, do you think?
Okay, well, way back when we worked on a movie called The Arrival, not Arrival, The Arrival,
The
uh,
Arrival, yeah.
with Charlie Sheen. It was written, directed by a filmmaker named David Toohey, and I worked with him a few times. And he
He did Pitch Black
um,
and yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
and Chronicles of Riddick. So on Pitch Black, he came to us, and this was a great moment. He came to us. He just rewritten the script from some other guys' scripts, and he came to me and Matthew Gratzer, my partner, and we sat down at a table, just the three of us, and we were talking about the opening scene. And he was talking about how he didn't have a lot of money, but he wanted to do this crash. And I knew he knew movies. So I said, well, what if we try it like Foreign Correspondent, where we do it mostly from the inside, like we're inside the spaceship and we're actually subjective to the crash event. And we cut outside once in a while, but for the most part, we're inside, the glass breaks and things fall apart and we're actually in there when it happens. And he said, yeah, I love that idea. So he started rewriting the scene to be more, Foreign Correspondent-esque in terms of like seeing it from the inside. And Matthew and I had a design off where we both designed the spaceship, and then David picked Matthew's version, which was this train in space. The idea being that like it's long and it's a train, but then you start letting go containers, trying to lighten up the load, and some of those containers are full of people, but you don't care because it's about saving your own skin. And so I started doing the storyboards for this sequence based on our discussions around that table. So here we've got the design, here we've got the storyboards we're working on. They're coming out of Hunter Gratzner. And the studio set the storyboards and the designs out to other people to build, to get bids. And so we find out that they're bidding other people to do the work. And we have a meeting at the studio, and David's sitting there at the table with us, and they're like, okay, we love you guys, great work, we love the boards and everything, we know you did some fine work for him on the Arrival, but we're just going to have other people like look at getting us bids on doing this work. And Tui stands up in the middle of this meeting and says, you guys don't understand, these guys just aren't model makers, they're filmmakers. And I thought that was such a great moment for him to like, don't you get it? Like, it's not just this isn't a rental house where you rent C-stands. We're part of the casting process. As much as you want the right actor or the right DP, you want the right effects people doing the work. And so I don't know if that's part of it, is the dedication to like trying to be part of the filmmaking and trying to be part of the storytelling, and being more than just the guy that like delivers, the tank or whatever, I think that's part of the reason why, I occasionally still get called upon to do this kind of work, is because I'm a filmmaker and I want to be telling that story with them, and being intrinsic to that narrative.
That is a brilliant answer, and one that I hadn't really considered, like the casting of an effects house. I think that's and the artists within. I think that's a really nice way to put it. I feel like I could talk to you for many hours. We've reached the hour and a half point now.
Oh, geez.
I think that would be a really nice closing point there. But what I do want to ask is just one final question. We'll see where it goes. If not, we'll kind of end it there. You've worked on so many cool movies. You've been involved in so many great sequences. I'm not going to ask you which one is your favourite. Don't worry. I hate that podcasty question. What I was going to ask you was, what are you working on now? You talk about being a filmmaker yourself, of course. What about directing yourself? Is that something that's been on the cards and been in your mind for years?
Yeah, actually, it has. Funny you would ask. Yeah, I've really always wanted to be a director. I actually, lucked out getting into the movie business, and then immediately wanted to become a director. And I've directed shorts, I've directed commercials. I got to kill Sean Bean, which was a fun, wonderful thing to have in my resume. Directed a scene with him getting killed, so got that.
What was that in?
Oh, that was the film. It's called Don't Say a Word, and it's an actual kind of nice thriller with Michael Douglas and Sean Bean, where they're looking for a jewel.
Early 2000s kind of,
huh?
Early 2000s kind of, yeah.
into that open grave, and the grave collapses on him. And
Yeah, I
Gary
saw
Fleder, the
that movie.
director, huh?
I saw that movie. Wasn't Brittany Murphy in that?
Yes, yeah, sad,
Oh
yeah,
my,
she did a great
wow! You
job
just
in that.
opened up a memory there for me. Yeah.
But yeah, Sean Bean falls into the pit, and Gary Fleder, the director, is like, "So I want to bury him alive, and how are you going to do it?" And I said, "We're going to bury him alive. That's how we're going to do it." So, so that's an outstanding one. Not that it's the outstanding one, but to me, and doing dramas is sometimes harder than doing the fantasy or the science fiction movies, because your suspension of disbelief when you're watching a fantasy is or a superhero movie is like, you expect that, but to
Yeah.
pull off something in a drama and not take people out of the movie is a very difficult process and very difficult exercise. And so I'm always proud of those movies when we're able to pull that sort of work off. um, yeah, I mean, it was a few years ago. I was up to directing a movie. It was a low budget science fiction movie. We were 4 weeks from starting pre-production. The money got pulled, so that was very uh, took the wind out of my sails, so to speak. But I'm still pursuing that, still trying to get into that position. Because of that, we're entrusted to do these shots, these scenes from directors, and I always jokingly said there's uh, only of all the directors I've worked with, I can only count on one hand the number of directors I have respect for, and two of
Mm.
them are brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So, so, so if they can do it, I can do it, and it's a little bit arrogant, but it also, I think, through the years, having worked with them and having, like in the Damien Chazelle moment, like, oh, this is how he wants to shoot it,
Mm.
presenting that, and like he's agreeing that, yeah, that's how he wants to do it, and he's giving me that input. Um, that means I'm in tune with what the story is. And I remember being at a table read for a pretty big movie, and we're reading the script, and I was like visual effects art director on the movie, and so I'm not even sitting at the real table. I'm sitting at the kids' table, but there were these questions coming up from the director and from other people, like, what about this? And I'm looking at the script, and I said, but it says right here, like, oh my God, I realized they aren't seeing the movie playing in their head as a movie when they read the script. They're not taking the words and translating that visually.
Mm. Mm.
And I am. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but you're in charge of this visual medium and you don't
Yeah.
have it. So at that point, I realized, I do have it.
Mm.
And through the years, having worked with people, I do have the ability to do that. So it's always been something I've wanted to do, which is direct. And I'm still pursuing that to this day.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, Ian. It's been so cool talking to you. Like I said, I feel like we could talk for another couple of hours, probably. Maybe we need a part two of this, little,
Maybe
a little while,
we skipped
because
over
there's
everything post Stetson and pre Nolan, but yeah.
we did. There's a lot of movies in there. I mean, yeah. All right. Well, listen, if you're willing to commit to a part two, so am I.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I would love to do that. I think there's a lot more people I could mention, and I'd love to talk about those films I'd worked on in the past.
So that was my conversation with Ian Hunter there. It's one of the most thoughtful and articulate people I've spoken to about what it actually means to work in practical effects and VFX at the highest level, not just building things, but thinking like a filmmaker and reading the story and understanding what the audience needs to feel. Like he said, they aren't just model makers, they're filmmakers. We barely scratched the surface, of course, as we said. There are entire chapters of Ian's career we didn't get into, and he's already agreed to come back on for part two, as you heard. And I can't wait. So looking forward to that. Until then, if you enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone else you think might love it. If you want to support the podcast, because it is just me and my laptop and my mic and a guest, I've got no big marketing budget. I've got no producer. I've got no editor. I'm doing everything myself. So if you enjoy it, I'd really appreciate your support. And that could just be like $12 for 1 year. You'd be contributing to those 24 episodes in terms of the time it takes and the effort it takes for me to do those things. And I really want to keep doing this, but I have to make an income from it. So patreon.com/Jamie Benning. And I'd really appreciate that. If you can't do anything monetarily, as I said, just please share. Go on YouTube, comment, tell me what you think of the episodes. Let's get a conversation going. Let me know who else you'd like to hear on the podcast. I'll try my best to get those guests as well, if I agree that they would be interesting. So thanks for joining me, and I hope you can do so for the next episode of the Filmumentaries podcast.
Weirding.